Chapter 8. Sabrina gasped. You want us to help you break out of prison? Jack nodded his head. Quite right. How are we supposed to do that? Sabrina asked. Easy. You go into the front door and distract the guard. The little one here will hit him in the gob with a club or something and snatch his keys. I'm 7 years old. I can't hit someone with a club. And not in the gob, whatever that is, Daphne cried. Sure you can. Deputy Crane isn't going to put up a fight. He's daft in the head and jumpy as a flea. But if he does, all you have to do is hit him in the shins. He'll fall over like a sack of potatoes, Jack replied. She's not hitting anyone with a club, Sabrina said. Well, if saving your granny and her pal isn't important to you, I can just stay in the nick. Sabrina looked into Jack's hopeful face. How could this odd little man actually be the key to Granny and Mr. Canis's survival? It just didn't seem possible, but on the other hand, the note Granny had left told them that the mirror would have all the answers they needed. After 2 days of disbelieving everything the old woman had told her, Sabrina didn't feel like being proved wrong again, especially when so much was riding on the outcome. So, girls, what's it going to be? If I could do it myself, I would have already, but Bobby took my lock-picking kit when he put the cuffs on me. Smart on his part, too. There isn't a door Jack can't open. We'll get you out of here, but we're going to do it my way, Sabrina declared. No one is going to get hurt. Deal? Jack frowned, but he thrust his hand out the window. He shook Sabrina's and smiled. So, boss, what's the plan? First, I'm going to need your shirt. When Sabrina opened the front door to the police station, her heart was pounding faster than ever. They were taking a huge chance, especially with Sheriff Hempstead and his deputies searching for them. By now, Crane had to know the girls were on the loose. Two kids dressed in bright orange monkey sweatshirts flying around on a magic carpet with a 200-pound Great Dane weren't going to be too hard to spot. On the upside, what they were about to do was the sneakiest thing the girls had ever tried. It was nice to be challenged every once in a while. When the door swung open, Sabrina half expected to find Hempstead, Borman, and Swinehart waiting for them, but luckily the station was empty except for a tall, painfully thin man with gigantic hooked nose, thin lips, and an Adam's apple that bobbed up and down. Ichabod Crane looked just like the story described him. He was fast asleep, sitting in a chair with his feet propped up on a desk. Sabrina found the light switch and flipped it off, drowning the room in murkiness. She gestured behind her, and the carpet drifted in, hovering 2 feet off the ground, carrying its own headless horseman, Daphne, sitting on Elvis's back and wearing Jack's shirt so that her head was hidden inside. He's going to figure this out, Daphne whispered. It's our only shot, Sabrina replied. She crouched down behind an empty desk and cupped her hands around her mouth. She kicked the door shut and it slammed so loudly that the poor man fell backward over in his chair. Once he was on his hands and knees, he rubbed his eyes and looked around in the dark. Who's there? He called in a whiny, high-pitched voice. Crane, Sabrina moaned in the deepest voice she could produce. The carpet slowly drifted across the room, carrying its headless passenger. You, the deputy cried in horror. You're supposed to be gone. I have returned, Sabrina croaked. The dark room was creating a very believable nightmare. Crane scurried around the room, hiding behind desks and chairs in the best he could. Crane, you cannot hide from me. I am the headless horseman. I see all. I'm a law enforcement officer now, Crane shouted, trying to muster his courage. A defender of peace. I can arrest you for riding a horse without a head. That's a serious crime in this town. Your laws mean nothing to me. I've come for something, Crane, and I will have it, Sabrina bellowed. What do you want? The deputy cried. Your head, Sabrina groaned. Crane burst into tears. No, please, not my head, he begged. Very well. If not your head, I'll take something else. Anything, whatever you want. I want the keys to the jail. Crane was silent for several moments. You want the keys? Would you prefer if I take your head instead? Sabrina moaned. Just as unlucky bounce of the carpet knocked Daphne off Elvis's back, and she fell to the ground, toppling the trash can into a radiator. The sound couldn't have been more appropriate, but Daphne was down for the count. Unable to see, she failed in her costume, causing more commotion and sending a computer crashing to the floor. Crane, who seemed to think this was part of the Headless Horseman's attack, shouted, Here are the keys, and tossed them at Daphne's feet. Now go, before I change my mind, Sabrina said. Crane leaped to his feet and ran, not noticing her as he rushed out the station door. Once she was sure he was gone, Sabrina stood up and turned on the lights. Daphne was still rolling around, unable to see anything. Get me out of this, the little girl begged. Sabrina unhooked the top buttons of Jack's shirt, and Daphne's head popped up. Elvis immediately licked her face. You were very convincing, Sabrina laughed as she helped her sister to her feet. Daphne growled, Let's break Jack out of here. Sabrina rolled up the carpet and flung it over her shoulder, and the two girls raced to find Jack. Down the long hallway at the back of the building were two jail cells. The one on the left was empty, but the one on the right held Jack. He stood with his arms reaching through the bars, and the girls approached. Corking, I told you it would work, he cheered. Now get me out of here. Sabrina handed Jack the keys as he sorted through them. He found the right one, stuck it in the lock, and turned it from the inside. The door clinked, and he pushed it open. Elvis lunged angrily at the cell, growling and barking wildly. The big dog sniffed and snarled at Jack. Elvis, it's okay, he's a friend, Daphne said, which seemed to calm the dog down, but he continued sniffing at full alert. Crane ran like he'd seen the devil himself, Sabrina said proudly. I've seen the devil, and you're not him, a voice said from down the hallway. Sabrina turned and found Deputy Crane standing in the doorway, blocking their exit. He was so angry he was shaking. Get back in your cell, Jack, the deputy ordered, pulling his billy club from its strap and swinging it threateningly. Sorry, Itchy. I wish I could help you, but I've got other plans. Now, are you going to let us pass or not? To are we going to have to get rough? Jack threatened. Daphne grabbed his undershirt and yanked on it. You promised no one gets hurt. Jack scowled. I wouldn't hurt him much, he said. Bring it on, you washed-up has-been. Jack laughed. That's what I am? A washed-up has-been? I'd watch what you say, Itchy. Things can change in the blink of an eye. Not in Fairyport Landing, Jack. Carpet, let's wrap this up, Jack commanded, and the carpet lifted off Sabrina's shoulder. It darted down the hallway and like an anaconda wrapped Crane inside it. He fumbled and fought, but he couldn't break free. Jack walked over to the rug and patted it lightly. Nothing personal, Icky, but destiny awaits. He said. He grabbed the end of the carpet and pulled it roughly, causing Crane to spin away like a top. After several rotations, the skinny man collapsed to the floor, overcome by dizziness. Jack set the carpet on the floor and stepped onto it. All right, ladies, he said as he extended his hand to help the girls on the rug. Elvis rushed in to join them and stood like a guard between the girls and Jack. Carpet up, Sabrina said. It rose a few feet and then sank slowly back down like a balloon with a hole in it. Why aren't we going up? Daphne cried. We must be too heavy, Jack groaned. Can we lose the hound? Elvis answered him with a threatening snarl. Very well, Carpet. Take us to the Grim house. Though it was weighed down, the carpet didn't lack any of its speed. It zipped along 3 feet off the floor, down the hallway, through the main room, and out the front door of the police station. It sailed across the parking lot and made a left into the street, causing a pickup truck to screech at a stop. As they passed, the girls waved friendly, sorry gesture to the bewildered driver. That was almost too easy, Jack said. But no sooner he had puffed out his chest, the sound of a siren wailed in their ears. A moment later, the police car turned the corner and raced in the group's direction. Ichabod Crane was behind the wheel. Tenacious, isn't he? Jack said. Tenacious? Daphne asked. It means persistent, Sabrina said. And what does persistent mean? Daphne asked. It means he's not giving up. And I wouldn't have it any other way, Jack assured them. Carpet, faster. Is this the best idea? Sabrina shouted, holding to an end of the carpet as they raced between cars and it ran a red light. We're attracting a lot of attention. It's about time this little burg saw some action, Jack cried out happily. Fairyport Landing, you haven't seen anything yet. Sabrina heard a horrible crunching sound behind them and turned back to see what could have made such a loud noise. What she saw stole the breath from her lungs. The road behind them began to rise like a massive wave rolling in from the ocean. It was followed by another horrible crunching sound. She watched parked cars get tossed aside like toys. We're in luck, ladies, Jack said. We've already found our giant. Suddenly, an enormous foot planted itself in the middle of Main Street. The impact caused windows in nearby businesses to shatter. The ground exploded and a gas main underneath the street burst, shooting flames into the air. What do we do? Daphne cried. We have two choices, stand and fight and die a horrible, messy death, or run, Jack replied. Carpet, get us out of here, Sabrina shouted. The little rug sped away. Unfortunately, the giant was not discouraged by how fast the group was making its getaway. A single stride put the monster right behind them, even when the rug increased its speed again. And with every step the big monster took, the pavement crumbled beneath him. Electrical wires snapped, sprang sparks everywhere. The drivers on the road at that late hour lost control of their cars and crashed into buildings. Jack turned to see the chaos and grinned broadly. Finally, this is getting interesting, he laughed. The carpet took a sharp left turn, and Sabrina felt lucky she hadn't tumbled off when she noticed that Daphne was no longer sitting next to her. In fact, Daphne was hanging from the back of the carpet, holding on desperately with both hands. Jack! Sabrina cried. The spiky haired fellow reached down and grabbed the little girl by the back of her sweatshirt and hauled her onto the carpet. Blimey, this is better than a roller coaster, Jack laughed again as he set the girl safely on the carpet. Daphne hugged her sister. It was the first time Sabrina had ever felt her sister shake from fear. She didn't like it. We're going to get ourselves killed, she shouted as the carpet narrowly missed being crushed by a delivery truck filled with chickens. Nonsense. We can't die like this. We're immortal, Jack replied. You're immortal. We're not. We have to get off this road, Sabrina demanded. I see. Must be quite a pain to be a human, but the carpet picks the route. Just then, an 18-wheeler pulled directly into their path and stopped. Carpet up, everyone shouted. The carpet slowly rose, sputtering as if it were a little train that couldn't. We're not going to make it, Sabrina shouted. Lie down flat, Jack commanded. You can't mean what I think you mean. Jack nodded. The two girls reluctantly lay on their backs. Elvis play dead, Daphne said, and the dog lay on his side. The little girl turned a worried face to her sister. He's not going to do what I think he is he? Carpet down, Jack shouted, and the carpet fell from the sky until it was literally skidding across the pavement. Its momentum carried the group underneath the truck, the other side, and down the street. When they sat up again, the young man was already laughing until he looked up and saw the street cleaner barreling toward them. Carpet up! They all shouted as the little rug struggled higher, narrowly missing the boiling hot water and the sharp bristles of the machine used to scour the street. The carpet continued to rise until it cleared the vehicle. Sabrina turned and saw Ichabod Crane was out of his car, angrily ordering the drivers of the 18-wheeler and the street cleaner to move. Unfortunately, the traffic problems did little to stop the giant. Its monstrous foot soared high above the commotion and landed only yards from the carpet. That's the thing is going to kill someone, Sabrina shouted. Carpet, we have to get away from the main road. The carpet made an abrupt turn toward Ferryport Landing's farm community. The giant followed closely behind, and the little rug dodged the deadly footfall. Several times, the ugly brute reached out to squash the group in his hands, but each time the carpet zipped out of his reach. He grunted and beat his chest, but eventually gave up, shaking his fist in the air with frustration. Don't cry, big boy, Jack shouted to the giant as he disappeared behind the horizon. You'll be seeing me again very soon. As the magic carpet coasted up the driveway, it was barely 6 inches off the ground and seemed to have lost all of its kick. When the group finally stepped off it, the beautiful little rug dropped to the ground and rolled itself up, just as it had been delivered to the girls. Daphne leaned over and picked it up gingerly, the way one would a tired kitten, and cradled it in her arms. Poor thing is all worn out, she said, cooing. Sabrina looked toward the forest. Hampstead's squad cars were still perched in the tall trees behind the house, but he and his men were nowhere to be seen. Reaching into her pocket, Sabrina removed Granny Ralda's enormous keyring and began the tedious job of unlocking all the bolts. Jack watched attentively until she had unlocked every one. Before Sabrina could say the magic words that gained them entrance, Daphne pulled her aside, cupped her hand over her big sister's ear, and whispered, "Should we tell him?" It was a fair question. When they didn't listen to Granny Ralda, they regretted it. But they were in a tough situation. Letting Puck inside had turned out fine. Why not Jack? Plus, he was probably the only person in the world who could confront a giant. I don't think we have much of a choice, Sabrina whispered back. She made a fist and knocked on the door. We're home. Jack cocked an eyebrow in confusion. Family tradition, Sabrina said in hopes of throwing him off. Granny does it, and it makes Daphne laugh, so I picked it up too. Daphne faked a laugh. Jack shrugged. Whatever. What's he doing here? Puck said as he floated down from the sky. Jack turned over and eyed the flying boy whose huge wings flapped hard to allow him to hover over them. He's offered to help, Daphne explained, but this time her diplomacy fell on deaf ears. Help us do what? Try on some big pants? Puck sneered. You weren't supposed to bring him back. Listen, you little brat, I'm the only hope you've got, Jack replied. Two little girls and a garden gnome aren't going to stop a giant. Who are you calling a garden gnome, you insolent peasant? Puck said, pulling his flute from his sweatshirt. Boys, Sabrina and Daphne cried in unison, that's enough. Puck and Jack backed off. The girls looked at each other. Apparently, there was a bit of granny in both of them. What happened to Hampstead and his deputies? Sabrina asked. Charming came by and picked them up, Puck said, and he's staring a hole into Jack. I sat on the roof and watched him scream at them for half of an hour. It was hilarious. Good. We don't need them getting in the way, Sabrina said, turning and opening the front door. Elvis rushed past her and into the kitchen, returning a moment later with Granny Relda's handbag. He dropped it at the girl's feet and began to snarl at it. The girls ignored him. Daphne headed into the living room, set the carpet tenderly on the floor, and plopped down, exhausted, into the chair. She pulled a book from underneath the cushion and was sitting on and tossed it aside. So, this is the legendary Grimm house, Jack said as he wandered from room to room, peeking behind photographs and snooping around. Oh, I wish I had my camera with me. No one will believe I was actually here. Make yourself at home, please, Sabrina said. If Jack heard the sarcasm in her voice, he pretended not to and continued snooping. So, girls, where can I take a kip? He asked. Daphne looked at Sabrina for a definition, but Sabrina shook her head. I have no idea what that means. You know, hit the sack, Jack said. You want to go take a nap? I'm zonked. We didn't break you out of jail so you could camp out in our house. Kids, I was on a lumpy jail cot all night. I need to get some rest if I'm going to care for your very big problem. Besides, my plan can't go into effect until tomorrow night. Tomorrow night? Granny and Mr. Canis could be dead by then, Daphne said. Only if the big boy gets hungry, Jack said casually. I wouldn't worry too much. There are lots of things to eat in the forest. Sabrina watched Puck shake his head in disgust. He clearly thought Jack was a con artist, and she was starting to feel the same way. What's your plan? She asked. Right now, it's best that we don't discuss it. Jack fell onto the couch and stretched his arms behind his head. We'll talk about it later. I just need a couple hours of shut eye. He doesn't have a plan, Puck snapped. Puck looked at the girls, turned, and stopped toward the door. The girls chased after him. Where are you going? Daphne asked. What do you care? He complained bitterly. You've got your giant killer. Good luck. He slammed the door behind him. What do we do now? Daphne asked sleepily. Sabrina eyed Jack from the hall. He was already snoring. I suppose we might as well get some rest too, Sabrina said, seeing her sister's head droop. She scooped her grandmother's handbag off the floor and set it on the table, and then gently urged Daphne out of her chair. Elvis whined at the girls. Sabrina whispered and turned to the dog's ear. Elvis, keep an eye on Jack. The dog's eyes reflected in understanding, and he seated himself like a stone guardian, watching the sleeping man. The two girls went up to their bedroom. It had been a long day. Sabrina didn't remember falling asleep, but when she woke up, she was still in her clothes, and it was already 9 o'clock in the morning. She crawled out of bed, leaving her snoring sister alone, and walked down the hallway. She heard a sound from Granny Relda's room and decided to investigate, but when she opened the door, no one was there. She stepped inside and noticed a framed photo on the old woman's dresser. It was one of Relda and Basil, hugging happily under an apple tree. As usual, Mr. Canis was standing nearby. His face seemed slightly out of focus, and the camera flash had turned his eyes a bright blue color. Sabrina reached into her pocket and pulled out the photo she found in Granny Relda's handbag. Comparing the two, she found the same odd effect in Mr. Canis's eyes. Sabrina was surprised she hadn't noticed before. What are you doing in here? Puck's voice startled Sabrina. She dropped both the framed and unframed photos to the ground. Luckily, the glass didn't break. Sabrina looked around the room, searching for the boy, but she didn't see him. Up here, ugly, said Puck. Sabrina looked up and nearly screamed. A housefly the size of Elvis was sitting upside down on the ceiling above her, but its enormous size wasn't nearly as disturbing as its human head, which had a shaggy blonde hair, a gold crown, and a mischievous grin. Apparently, Puck had a whole bag of upsetting tricks. What are you doing in here? Sabrina demanded. It's the only quiet room in the house, Puck replied. Besides, I know you and Jack have your big plans. I wouldn't want to get in the way. Could you come down here? Puck suddenly morphed back into human form and fell clumsily in the bed below. You're being a baby, Sabrina said. Jack wants to help, and you can't stand not being the center of attention. Whatever, the boy replied. But when he gets you into trouble, don't be angry. I reminded that I told you so. If you have a better plan, then let's hear it, because all I've heard from you is the never-ending buzz of your flapping lips, Sabrina snapped. My parents ran out of me and Daphne almost 2 years ago. We've been going through the ringer and have been bounced around for far too long. I admit, when we met Granny Relda, I didn't want anything to do with her. But now I know she's the real deal, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get her back. I've lost one family, I'm not losing another. Don't look at me, Puck said. I made no promises to the old lady. She knew I was trouble when we met. Sabrina was taken back by his insensitivity. You couldn't care less what happens to her? I've learned one thing in his life. Look out for yourself. Everyone else will just end up disappointing you. So you won't help? You've already gotten one giant killer, Puck said. Suddenly, the sound of Elvis's barking filled the room. Sabrina peered into the hallway. There she saw Jack fighting with Elvis, who was shredding the man's pants with his angry teeth. Get this beast away from me, Jack begged. He's rabid. What are you doing up here? Sabrina asked suspiciously. I was coming to wake you. Daphne entered the hallway with rubbing sleep from her eyes. What's going on? The giant killer is prowling around the house looking for something to steal, Puck said. Your savior has sticky fingers. Shut your mouth, you dirty little hooligan, Jack shouted. Your compliments will get you nowhere. Elvis, calm down, Daphne said as she patted the angry dog on the head. Her touch seemed to have a soothing effect on him. Take a chill pill. Elvis released Jack's pant leg. Thank you, Jack said, eyeing his mangled trousers. So, are you ready to hear my plan? Sabrina looked at Puck, hoping the boy might reconsider it and help them, but he sneered and looked away. Yes, we are ready, she replied. Puck said nothing. He walked down the stairs. Sabrina heard the door close behind him. Little bugger was getting in the way, Jack said. Is anyone hungry? Let's have some breakfast. He rushed down the stairs into the kitchen, the girls following behind. They watched as he rifled through the contents of the refrigerator. There's nothing real to eat in this house, Jack complained. I could really go for some bubble and squeak or some bangers. Do you ducks think you could cook up some of that steak and kidney pie for me? The girls stared. I hear noises coming from his mouth, but they don't sound like words, Daphne said. Maybe he's having some kind of fit, Sabrina said. Jack rolled his eyes, snatched up some leftovers, and ate greedily. Let me tell you, lasses, he said, his mouth full, jail food is terrible. We'll take your word for it, Sabrina said. While Jack ate, the girls took turns telling him how Granny Relda and Mr. Canis had been kidnapped. Sabrina told him her theory about Mayor Charming being the mysterious Mr. Englishman and how she thought he was using the giant to scare people off their land. So tell us your plan, Daphne said as Jack finished his breakfast. I'm still working out the details. But the girls flashed Jack an angry look. Don't worry, he said defensively. It's going to be brilliant. Sabrina sighed and got up from her seat to grab the telephone. We helped you escape from jail so you could help us save our grandmother, and all you've done is eat our food and drool on our sofa. If you can't do it, then I'm going to call Deputy Crane and let him know you're ready to go back, she threatened. Put the phone down and relax, Jack said calmly as he helped himself to another chicken leg. You think tracking down a giant is easy? Giants have survived thousands of years, as big as they are, and they've learned a few things about staying out of sight. Now we can traipse through the woods, cut down the forest, and drag the Hudson River, but the fact is, if a giant doesn't want to be found, he's not going to be found. You're talking in circles, Sabrina complained. What I'm saying, Duck, is we need to use our heads. Think about what we know so far. The mayor is trying to buy up the entire town, so what better way than to get a giant to scare off their landowners who won't sell to him? So when your family started snooping around, he sent the big boy after you. He's got your granny, and now he's after the two of you. Go on, Sabrina said as she set the phone back in its cradle. Applebee's can't be the only Applebee's can't be the only farm Charming wants to buy. I bet he's got a map of Fairyport Landing in his office with all the properties he's after. If we get a look at it, I bet we could see where the giant will strike next. I bet the map will even tell us where the giant is hiding. All you have to do is sneak into his office during the ball tonight, find the map, and bingo bango, we kill the boy and save your grandma. Is that your plan? Sabrina cried. You've got something better? I know that sneaking into the ball doesn't sound as exciting as burning down the forest and waiting for the giant to run out, but I've always believed the easiest way is the best way. There's one big problem, though, Daphne spoke up. The mayor and the police are looking for you. You're going to have a tough time sneaking into the mansion. Oh, girls, I'm not going. You are. Us? We can't go into that party. They're looking for us, too, Sabrina cried. Don't worry, you'll be fine. In fact, you're going to go right through the front door and no one is even going to notice, Jack said confidently. I don't suppose you've got a map of the mansion around here, do you? As their hero rested, the girls frantically searched the books for a blueprint of Charming's estate. Eventually, in one of their grandfather Basil's many journals, they found a sketch of a rough plan of the house. The mayor's mansion was a sprawling, several-story palace with dozens of rooms. Their grandpa had given estimates of room sizes, locations of various windows, and even an indication of where he believed there was a secret passage. But he hadn't seen the entire house, and many parts of the drawing were labeled with question marks. Sabrina noticed he paid extra attention to possible escape routes. Apparently, their grandpa had been a bit of a sneak, too. Sabrina carefully studied the map and did her best to commit it to memory. When Jack finally woke up several hours later, he found the girls ready to get started. Let's go see your mirror, Jack said. I don't know what you're talking about, Sabrina said, stealing a look into Daphne's eyes. Girls, everyone knows Relda has the magic mirror. Why do you think the front door has a dozen locks on it? Sabrina took the keys out of the pocket and led her sister and the guest up the stairs. Once they arrived at the mirror's room, she inserted the key and unlocked the door. As before, the face in the mirror appeared with a thunderstorm behind it. Who dares? He bellowed. Turn off the drama, Mirror, Jack scoffed. Oh, it's you, Mirror mumbled. Of course it's me. I'm the bloke you call when you have a big problem, Jack bragged. And these girls have a really big problem. And where's the flying carpet? Mirror asked Sabrina. Sorry, she said. She walked to the doorway and called for it. After a couple of minutes, the carpet floated limply into the room. What have you done to it? Mirror cried as the carpet fell to the floor once again and rolled itself up. I think we've had too many people on it, Daphne explained, as Mirror's hand broke the surface, the reflection, and snatched the carpet from the ground. It's nearly unraveling in my hand, he wailed as he babied the rug. Poor little carpet. Look how they treated you. Girls, the things we store here are priceless and one of a kind. You really need to take good care of them. Save your lecture for later, Mirror Jack said. We need to sneak into Charming's mansion tonight, and we need some disguises. Perhaps you should go to a costume shop. And we need the slippers. Absolutely not, Mirror stammered. Listen, this house is going to be surrounded with the police any minute now. We need the slippers, Jack argued. Mrs. Grimm would not approve. The slippers were entrusted to this family so they would never fall into the wrong hands, Mirror replied. You can trust me, said Jack. Didn't you used to have your own magic items? What happened to the cloak of darkness? I lost it in a poker game. You lost the cloak that turns you invisible in a poker game? What about the shoes of swiftness? I hawked them. The cap of knowledge? The goose that laid the golden egg? The lost cap in the wind, and I lost the cap in the wind, and I accidentally left the window open one day, and the goose flew off. I suppose you sold the sword of sharpness, Mira grumbled. No, I still have the sword of sharpness, Jack said indignantly. I just misplaced it. It's in my flat somewhere. The point is, we need the slippers. If you won't let me have them, then let one of the girls. It doesn't make any difference to me. What slippers? Sabrina shouted. She was tired of their bickering. Dorothy's slippers, Jack and Mira shouted back. Dorothy from the Wonderful Wizard of Oz? Daphne exclaimed. Yes, Jack said impatiently. They transport you anywhere you want to go. All you have to do is click 3 times, Daphne cried. Give me the slippers. Girls, I have to warn you. The slippers are very powerful magic. There are still some in this town, who would slit your throats to possess them, Mirror said. We'll be careful, Jack said. And then he did something that shocked Sabrina. He stepped into the reflection and pushed the man in the mirror aside. How dare you, Mirror shouted. Come on, ducks, keep up, Jack said as his face appeared in the reflection. The girls were unsure of what to do. Daphne reached up and curled her hand into her sister's. Sabrina squeezed softly, and the two of them took a tentative step through the mirror. It was an odd sensation, almost as if they were caught in a summer rainstorm, and when they finally opened their eyes, a brilliant glimmering light flooded their pupils. What they saw made Sabrina queasy. It wasn't natural. It just wasn't possible. Her brain struggled to understand. Sabrina had half expected to walk into a perfect reflection of the room they had just left. After all, the mirror was a mirror. But she couldn't have been more wrong. Instead, she found herself in a long, wide hallway that reminded her of Grand Central Terminal. It was vast, with vaulted ceilings and endless archways of glass and steel. Glowing marble columns held up the ceiling, which rose hundreds of feet above them. Breathtaking sculptures of men and monsters lined the hall, and along each wall were hundreds of doors, all shapes and sizes, some no bigger than a rabbit and others 100 feet high. Some were wooden, others were steel, and still others seemed to be made from pure light. Sabrina looked down at Granny Relda's keyring and finally understood why there were so many. Yet another of Granny's eccentricities had a legitimate explanation. Even more startling, the gigantic room they were standing in was the man who lived in it. The face in the mirror was no longer a disembodied head. Gone was the intimidating visage. The man who stood before her was short and chubby, and he wore a suit and a tie. This is outrageous. Keep your hands in your pockets, Jack, Mirror insisted. Mirror, I am shocked. Don't you trust me? Jack said. I trust you about as much as the person who gave you that fat lip, said Mirror. What is this place? Daphne asked. It's an arcana-powered, multifaceted, trans-dimensional pocket universe, Mir replied. A what who? Your grandmother calls it the world's biggest walk-in closet, the little man explained. It's a sort of holding area for dangerous and valuable items. I call it the Hall of Wonders, and you're not supposed to be in here. Oh, Mir, Jack said, we've learned one of your secrets. Don't worry, I'm sure you have a million more. The little man's face flushed with anger. His fists clenched, and he looked as if he might hit Jack, but the giant killer just ignored him. All right, Mir, where are the slippers? Jack asked impatiently. I still have reservations about this plan, Mir complained. If the girls tell you to give them to us, can you resist? Jack asked. Mir sighed and frowned. No. Jack tilted his head toward Sabrina. Can we at least look? Sabrina asked. This way, Mir said, gesturing them to follow. He walked down the long hall, past many doors. This plaque on one read, Fairy Godmother Wands, and while the next read, Talking Plants. As they continued down the hallway, they passed more doors. They were labeled Poisonous Fruits, Dragon Eggs, Impossible Animals, Wishing Wells, Crystal Balls, Cursed Treasure, Scrolls and Prophecies, and on and on and on. Passing one massive door, the group jumped as a violent pounding from within threatened to knock it off its hinges. Something on the other side wanted out, something named Grendel. The group passed down the hallway until they finally stopped at a door that read Magic Shoes. Here we are, the mirror said reluctantly. But I must once again remind you that magic is dangerous. There's a reason why the Ever Afters asked this family to look after all these items. Magic in the wrong hands only leads to chaos. We'll be careful, said Sabrina, as she knelt down to the lock. It was a simple one that would take a skeleton key, but Granny Relda's ring had dozens of skeleton keys. Sabrina tried the first one and it failed. She tried another, still nothing. Let me try, Jack said impatiently. I've got it, Sabrina snapped. She turned another key, and this time the lock opened. The door swung wide, and they all entered. The room was simple, but its contents were amazing. Along the walls were hundreds of pairs of shoes, cowboy boots, woven sandals, wooden clogs, leather moccasins, and many more, all displayed on wooden shelves. Some of the shoes seemed as if they were made for animals, while others were big enough for the entire group to stand in. One golden pair had white wings that flapped as if the shoes were alive, and another glittering pair was made of pure glass. Jack picked up the pair of shoes with the wings, but Mir promptly smacked his hand and snatched it from his grip. After replacing the shoes, Mir crossed the room, picked up a pair of sparkling slippers, and handed them to Sabrina. Try to take better care of these than you did the magic carpet, he said gruffly. If these were the famous ruby slippers, they were more silver than red, though in the light Sabrina saw hints of warm, rosy color. She couldn't figure out what they were made of, but if forced to guess, she would have said tin foil. Put them on, lass, Jack said. They were way too small, Sabrina said as she eyed the shoes. One size fits all, Doc, Jack said. Sabrina yanked off her sneakers and slid her foot inside one of the slippers, which magically grew in size and fit her perfectly. Once she eased the other foot into the second shoe, she felt an odd energy shoot up her legs and fill her whole body. Just then, Jack let out a howl and darted out of the room and across the hall. Jack, Mirror shouted after him, but Jack didn't listen. When he and the girls finally found him, the giant killer was eyeing the door with the plaque that read Magic Beans. I can't believe you have a whole room of them, he shouted with glee. We might be bending the rules on the slippers, but those are off limits to the likes of you, Mirror said. How about a peek? Jack pleaded. He suddenly looked like a little lost boy. These things are a part of my past. Can a man walk down memory lane? Sabrina could see his expression, and all at once she felt sorry for him. Jack was a man whom the whole world celebrated. He'd been seen amazing things and lived life to the fullest, but being trapped in Fairyport Landing had put an end to all of it. It dawned on Sabrina that Fairyport Landing might have been the home of many of the world's fairy tale creatures, but it was also a prison they were never allowed to leave. It didn't seem right. Sabrina pulled out the keys, knelt down, eyed the keyhole, and within seconds opened the door. Jack pushed past her into the tiny room where a single mason jar sat on a table. Inside it was a collection of little white beans. Jack gasped and picked up the jar. There must be 100 of them. Mir snatched the jar out of his hand and placed it back on the table. These things are dangerous. If you drop them on the floor, we'd be ear deep in giants. Jack scowled for a moment. and looked as if he were ready to fight for his treasure. But he took a deep breath and his anger vanished and replaced with a boyish grin. Thanks, Grims. You don't know what you've done for me, he said. Mir hurried everyone back through the door. Well, ladies, now that we've got the shoes, we need the proper disguises, Jack said. I think a little fairy godmother magic will do the trick. Wands are over here, Mir said, leading them down the hallway. They stopped at a door labeled Fairy Godmother Wands, and Sabrina unlocked it. Inside sat a small black cauldron with several wands sticking out of it. Mira reached into the pot, removed one with a glittery glass star on the end, and handed it to Sabrina. The first magical item your family ever confiscated, Mira said. I remember old Willem Grimm trying to get that away from her, Jack laughed. Girls, I'll say one thing about your family. They are brave. Fairy godmothers are sweet as pie, but try to take their wands away and they can get downright mean. Indeed, Mira said. How does this work? Sabrina asked. Mira frowned. I can't believe your father, he cried. I'd hoped that your mother, Veronica, might at least have given you the basics behind his back. Very well, this is your makeover wand. It will alter your clothes, shoes, even your bodies in any way you choose, with just a flick of the wrist. Why do we need a makeover? Daphne asked, looking down at her orange monkey sweatshirt. We look amazing. You need to look like an ever after. Charming's ball is going to be filled to the rafters with them, and you have to fit in, Jack said. No humans. Daphne smiled. I know what I want to be. I want to be the Tin Woodsman. Are you sure, honey? The little man in the mirror asked. Tin is so last season. Daphne nodded enthusiastically. Very well. It's your fashion funeral, he said. Sabrina, just say Tin Woodsman, make 3 small circles with the wand, and then tap her on the head. Okay, Sabrina said. Tin Woodsman. She made 3 awkward circles in the air and then smacked her sister on the head with the wand. Daphne squealed in pain and rubbed the spot. But as she was rubbing, a miraculous change began to occur. Her skin took on a silvery tone. She grew several feet taller and her clothes faded, only to be replaced by gears and joints. Her hair retreated to her scalp and a shiny funnel took its place. Sabrina blinked her eyes to be sure they weren't playing tricks on her, but she knew they weren't. Her sister had become the Tin Woodsman. That hurt, Daphne cried as her hand scraped against the new metallic head. Hearing the screech of the metal in her ear, she looked at her hand and squealed in delight. She walked around the hall, squeaking with every step. Look at me. Spitting image, Jack said. Daphne took the wand from her sister. Okay, who do you want to be? Sabrina was stumped. She realized she had to choose wisely. She needed to be inconspicuous at the ball, someone small and unnoticeable, and someone who could be very, very sneaky. Okay, I was thinking, I know, Mama Bear, the little girl interrupted. And before Sabrina could stop, she performed the circles and cracked her big sister on the head. Sabrina felt the transformation immediately, as if her body were being inflated. Her clothes disappeared and were replaced with bright pink and white polka dot dress and that ended well above the knee. She looked down at her humongous arms and groaned as her hair exploded from every pore. Fangs burst from the top of her mouth, and razor sharp claws sprang from her fingers and toes. She could feel them scratching at the insides of the ruby slippers, which expanded to her new size, 26 feet. When the transformation was complete, Daphne giggled. You did that on purpose, Sabrina growled. You're so cute, Daphne cried as she threw her metal arms around her sister and gave her a big hug. I could just eat you. Well, no one's going to see the 2 of you coming, Jack moaned, though it was obvious that he found the whole thing funny. Girls, you realize there's a timer with the makeover wand. When the clock strikes 9 o'clock, you're going to change back. Do you understand? Mira lectured. 9 o'clock? Cinderella's fairy godmother gave her until midnight, Sabrina argued. Cinderella was 17 years old. You are 11. There's no way your grandmother would approve of you staying out until the wee hours of the morning. I don't think she'd mind since we're trying to save her life. That doesn't give us much time. It's 7 o'clock now, Jack said, eyeing his wristwatch. Mirror took the wand from Daphne and put it back into the pot. He led the group out of the room, closed the door, and when Sabrina couldn't manage, locked he led the group out of the room, closed the door, and when Sabrina couldn't manage, locked it with Granny's keys. One last thing, Jack said. You don't happen to have any walkie-talkies in this place, do you?